What is up, everybody? Welcome into Trail Tidbits, a new football season, a new rendition of Trail Tidbits here at Volquest.com. I'm your host. I just lob it up, and Matt Ray steps up to the plate and hits it out of the park, talking Tennessee recruiting each and every single week. And, man, it's been a nice little run, dude. You look at that class. We'll look at the 26 class overall here in just a second, but, last couple of weeks, some really good movements there on the recruiting trail. Let's start with the big news last couple of days. Kamari Blair flipped last week, and Matt, it felt like you and I talked after it happened, or right before it was going to happen. It felt like this one was very reminiscent of a Deshaun Brame in Oregon 2 summers ago, right? It was Tennessee was in the driver's seat the entire time. All of a sudden, Oregon, in this case South Carolina, comes out of left field and gets them to commit in the class, and then couple weeks, maybe a month goes by. It's like, man, my heart is in Knoxville. That's what it felt like with Kamari Blair, and a big-time flip. Highly rated 4-star offensive tackle prospect. We'll talk about the offensive line class here in a moment, but that was a priority for Tennessee, and Tennessee never gave up. LRB never gave up and got him to flip back into the class.
Yeah, Tennessee really, really likes Kamari Blair. They really like Kamari Blair's upside. And, you read our impact analysis over at Volquest. This is a guy that showed up 2 years ago, 27 months ago, whatever it was, to football practice at Kirkwood there, and he was 6'6", 215 pounds. He's 6'6", 285 now, and his head coach raves about the buy-in to the weight room and everything that he does. He's super athletic. Seeing him over on campus a couple of times this summer, he is massive, but he looks like he's 35 years old. He looks like a guy that you want in your offensive line room. Carries himself really well and handles his business. But you're right, Eric. It felt pretty reminiscent to Deshaun Brame in Oregon last year, where Tennessee just kept weighing on him. Didn't push really hard, but just kept showing that consistency. And that's what this staff does such a good job of doing. I was looking back earlier today before we recorded this, and in one of the 3-2-1s that we do, I predicted that Tennessee would pull off a late flip of a coveted prospect. Last cycle, there were 4 guys that they flipped. So you look at Kamari Blair, and this is a guy that Tennessee offered, they coveted, and they just continued to stay persistent in their pursuit, and it paid off here as they're able to flip him away from South Carolina, who really wanted him in their class with what they're trying to build along the offensive line.
What I like about this is Kamari Blair, offensive tackle. Gabriel Senda, a mountain of a man, offensive tackle. Shabazz, tackle, can play some guard. Ed Baker, that's not rankings-wise, is not really in the same realm as the other 3, but as more of an interior prospect. Look at this class, man, and, deserving or not deserving, the knock on Glenn Ellerbe last couple of years is, outside of one big fish, if you will, David Sanders comes to mind, hasn't done a great job recruiting. This class is good. Developmental and Baker, but these 3 at the top, man, Blair, Osenda, and Shabazz, these are highly rated prospects that Tennessee beat out. Ohio State's, Georgia's, South Carolina in this situation. I mean, Tennessee's got it going on the offensive line right now for the class of 26.
Yeah, without a doubt. And, I think you look at Ed Baker, and I'll say something here. I think Ed Baker is the most underrated prospect in this cycle, not in this Tennessee class. I think he might be the most underrated prospect in the entire cycle. He plays at St. Francis Academy. He plays at a really high level. When you kind of look at his recruitment, the schools that were recruiting him, Tennessee, Penn State, Arkansas, we all know what Sam Pittman is as an offensive line guru. Ole Miss was the school that came in and made it really tough for Tennessee down the stretch there. That had been the Vols for months. Ole Miss gave him plenty to think about. Colorado offered after he committed to Tennessee. Ed Baker's a guy that for me is stock up, but hasn't done a lot of camps, hasn't done a lot of these things outside of St. Francis Academy necessarily to have a lot of opportunity to evaluate. And that interior of the offensive line is a really hard position to evaluate. But I think when you look at it from a Tennessee standpoint, Ed Baker was valued by them more than some guys that you might look at those rankings that are high 4-stars inside the on 300, the Rivals 300 now, and you look at it and say, oh, he's not rated as high as they are. I promise you he was higher for Tennessee than some of those guys were. Josh Heupel took a really invested interest in him. Glenn Ellerbe did a really good job of recruiting him. And you go back to his comments, Glenn Ellerbe checking in on him multiple times in the spring, making him feel comfortable on campus through spring practice visits, official visits. That was a big deal to them. This is an offensive line group that is really, really strong for Tennessee. You kind of summed it up. You got two mountains, and JB Shabazz is a big dude too. But you got two mountains in Kamari Blair and Gabriel Osenda. You got JB Shabazz, who can do a little bit of everything. Ed Baker can be an anchor on the interior over time as he cleans some weight up, improves some footwork. Just a really strong group. I saw Gabe Osenda on Friday night getting in action, and it's just like I look at him every time I see him, it feels like he gets a little bit bigger, which doesn't seem possible because none of it's ever bad weight. It doesn't seem like he's carrying any bad weight. And my example to that is it's 90 degrees at kickoff, and he's starting at left tackle, and he plays like 23 snaps on defense. He wasn't doing that last year as a junior, really. He was playing 2 on, 2 off, 3 on, 2 off on defense during the first half and wanting more. He's a guy that's took a step since he's been at Baylor. I think I was the first person to interview him at Baylor. Once he got there, he hadn't even put on pads yet. And Eric Kimry, the coach there at Baylor, said, "Hey, you need to know this guy. He's going to be our next big time guy." And boy, was he ever right. But Gabe Osenda, man, he's just continued to take strides, and he is a perfectionist in his craft, and he's trying to do the other things. He was the vocal leader of that team that's looking to get back to a state title and get that monkey off their back and beat McCauley there in that state championship this year. He's a guy that I just think continues to do things the right way. And then you got two really high upside guys in JB Shabazz and Kamari Blair.
Yeah, it's interesting too because like depending on where you look, like rankings wise, right? Like one outlet is so high on Gabriel Osenda, and then Rivals is so high on JB Shabazz, and any way you want to spin it, there are a lot of people that like these guys. So I like this offensive line class for sure. You look at the class in general, right? I mean, it's not done, it's not official. There's still some targets out there, edge, this player, that player, but this class overall, right around top 10, led by 5-star and Faison. We've mentioned several on the offensive line. We've mentioned some of the skill. Joel Wyatt, two of the best athletes in the country, and Wyatt that's going to play defensive back, Moa that's going to play wide receiver. The linebackers love this class, and Rouse and White. And then there's some high upside guys that I think can turn into something like Zach Groves, a guy that I know you are super, super high on. On the edge is C.J. Edwards that Tennessee loves.
Yep.
What do you like about this class? Kind of current standing heading into the new season, but these guys now, getting off to their senior seasons as well.
Well, I think, again, just some of what you touched on right there. It's something we've touched on the last 2 years during Trail Tidbits, and it's something I'd say we'll touch on a good bit again this year. Tennessee has done a great job of evaluating guys that fit into what they're trying to do, be that offensively or defensively, and taking them regardless of a ranking system, regardless of what they are, and they stick to their guns on those guys, and they continue to pay off. I mean, when you kind of look at fall camp this go around, we talked a lot about Tyler Redmond on Trail Tidbits. We talked a lot about him on Trail Tidbits last year, and he's a guy that has come out in fall camp and has flashed.
A guy that nobody was talking about, and Idris Farouk is going to be a starting safety.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, absolutely. And Tennessee, those are two prime examples defensively of guys that they were in on really, really early. Tennessee got Tyler Redmond committed in like October of his junior year, right shortly after Dylan Lewis. So, I mean, when you look at that, the long-term faith that they had in him, now it's paying off. A guy that they also got not committed quite as early, but they got committed really early. That's making some waves, contending for that 4th safety spot, Sidney Walton. When you look at this for Tennessee, it's continued to add up over time, and I think that's the biggest thing that I like with this class is it's guys that they evaluated early on that they kept their foot pressed down on, and it doesn't matter where the rankings fall. The biggest example of that to me is Braden Rouse. And I'll tell you why. Braden Rouse showed up in Knoxville, September or October of last year, and nobody really heard of him. Yeah. He was just starting to pick up some offers. And I think Tennessee had maybe offered him leading in to one of those visits. But as you kind of talk to people around the program, there was belief that Braden Rouse could be a top 10, top 5 linebacker in the country. And look at where he's at now. And that recruitment just played out down the stretch to where if you're Tennessee, you saw that early evaluation, you built that early relationship, and you used it to get to the finish line. I think there's a lot of examples of that in this class. But overall, I think there's a lot to like about this class. We've already touched on the offensive line. I really like, what Tennessee's done at receiver in this class. And then, obviously you get Faison in this class. I mean, that's huge, but defensively, it's been a lot more of what Tennessee continues to do. Coach Chop will continue to pursue those edge guys, Tristan Givens, Hezekiah Harris. Those have kind of always, were always going to be long plays, especially if Tennessee didn't flip one of them, or if they didn't flip Hezekiah during official visit season and they weren't able to win out for Tristan Givens. They knew they were never going to go away in those recruitments. So those are a little bit more long plays down the stretch, and Tennessee's done a good job of, staying consistent and trying to win some of those off. So we'll see what happens there. But some guys in this class that have a lot of potential that Tennessee believes in that just maybe aren't quite as highly rated as they should be.
Yeah, I mean, that's what's fun about recruiting. I don't have to tell you, obviously, that your recruiting is your life. But, I mean, I've been around recruiting for a while. I used to cover it a little bit more than I do now. But you got the highly ranked guys. You got the under-the-radar guys. You got the long game developmental guys. That everybody's like, why are you taking this guy? It doesn't make sense. And it's like, well, that guy's Ty Redmond, and he's going to play this year for Tennessee as a true freshman. It's like the way coaches view players much differently the way, we or fans that might often just get lost in the rankings or whatever. So I think recruiting's so much fun in that regard. And you kind of like what you like about each class, and there's a lot to like about this class for sure. Looking ahead to next year's class, we'll end on this one, and we're going to talk a lot about 27s, guys coming to campus. You're out there almost every Friday night this football season, checking in on guys, talking with guys, and one of your first stops was to see Baylor, and Gabriel send Jamie and Theodore, who's in this class as well. You got to see him, but man, tell me about the hottest running back prospect in the 2027 class. David Gabriel Georges kind of had to split time last year in the running back field for Baylor, but it's all his now. And you and I were talking before we went on air. I mean, that guy looks like he's already SEC ready, and he's literally just a junior right now.
Yep. Yeah, this is a guy that's going to make a run at Mr. Football in that classification. This is a guy that has the attention of all of the top programs in the country right now. I mean, you talk to him and he starts naming it off. It's Texas, Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, Tennessee, Notre Dame, Penn State. All these schools are reaching out to him. Syracuse is, up pretty close to where he's from in Canada. So they're trying to reach out and make a play. But this is a guy that, man, I went back down to Baylor this spring. I like to frequent Baylor at least once in the spring or in the summer if I can. And Eric Kimry told me, he said, hey, look at him down there. And I already knew who he was. And that wasn't what he was referencing. It was the continued transformation of his body. I mean, he looks like an SEC-ready running back right now as a junior in high school. And he's a guy that's built a really solid relationship with Tennessee. Tennessee's looking to get him back to campus for the Georgia game later this fall. And I think there's a good chance that he makes another trek up to Knoxville before the end of the season as he, wants to get family here and to see Tennessee. He wants to go up, visit with his teammates. He's planning to take in the Alabama and Georgia game, and he's planning to take in the Texas and Ohio State game, and then the Tennessee-Georgia game. Those are the three that are pretty firm on his schedule right now, but I think Tennessee's got a pretty good chance to host him as he continues to build a really strong relationship with Darrell Sims. And it's going to be one of those things, again, where Tennessee's going to be in this one until the end, in my opinion. And, he's a guy, I think, over time that you're going to see contend for that number one running back spot in the 2027 cycle.
I can believe it, man. And you're right. Doesn't matter who eventually gets his commitment, what his timeline is. Again, still just a junior, but Ohio State, Georgia, Texas, Alabama, Tennessee. I mean, best of the best going to be fighting for him every single step of the way. But you got to like already the quote-unquote pipeline, if you want to call it that, Baylor to UT, a lot of the relationships, a lot of his teammates, former teammates that are with Tennessee now, going to Tennessee, and certainly, playing high school football down in the Chattanooga area doesn't hurt Tennessee whatsoever. So Tennessee's going to be a main factor in this one for quite some time. All right, lot we discussed here on this episode of Trail Tidbits. Plenty more to come up next week on Trail Tidbits. We do it every single week right here at Volquest.com. Matt Ray takes center stage, tells us what we need to know about this weekend's games for prospects, commits, and who he saw last week as well. He'll bring that intel with us right here every single week, right on Trail Tidbits. For Matt Ray, I'm Eric Kane. Thank you so much for being here. This is Trail Tidbits at Volquest.com.